I'm not doing that on camera. They're a dangerous mob, the Bus Industry Confederation, I've found. But I'm very pleased to be back with you again, and thank you for the generous welcome once again. This is a mob that are concerned about Australia's future, and the fact that you always invite people who aren't just bus industry says something about your perspective, which is about the national interest, not just your sectoral interest. And you always do that, and I admire the gutsy and valuable contribution you make to the debate. To Alana McTiernan, my parliamentary secretary, I haven't had an opportunity to say that before. Also, of course, the parliamentary secretary for Western Australia, and someone who has a track record of delivering on infrastructure in the West. Not just public transport, but also, of course, in terms of roads. To John Cobb, who's here, my parliamentary colleague Shane Rattenbury, the ACT Minister. If I missed anyone, any of the other colleagues here, to you all, one and all. Look, it is good to be here. And I've got a few stats to roll out in terms of my initial contribution, because I asked to chase up exactly the contribution of your industry. 87,000 buses registered, more than 3,000 bus companies employing 50,000 people, including, I think, importantly, one of the things that I don't think is necessarily understood in the broader sense is your role in terms of manufacturing. 15 bus manufacturers employing 10,000 people. Pretty impressive in terms of the contribution that you make to employment at that level as well. Look, I'm here, you know me very well, so you know what I stand for. And I stand for the same things I did, even though there's the nasty word of shadow before my title. I believe that the national government, if it is to be truly a national government in a country such as Australia, the most urbanised country on the planet, has to be interested in urban policy and our cities. And I note that the work that we did in government is something that I'm particularly proud of. The establishment of the Major Cities Unit as one of our first initiatives, the establishment of Infrastructure Australia to break that nexus that's there between the political cycle, which is very short term, 3 years, as opposed to the infrastructure investment cycle, which by definition has to be longer. That was controversial. I take some heart over the fact that we're now in a debate over how independent Infrastructure Australia should be, not whether it should exist. And we will be moving amendments that I'm confident now, listening to Minister Briggs, that they'll back in, because our amendments to the legislation will do what the current government's rhetoric says it supports. It will ensure that Infrastructure Australia can examine any project that it wishes to, that it can't be excluded as provided for in the current legislation that went through the House of Representatives to exclude classes of projects. The problem with that isn't just a simple thing of saying that a minister could, if the current Act as envisaged is passed, can say, well, you can't look at public transport, you've just got to look at this road. The problem is it destroys the whole purpose of Infrastructure Australia, which is to look at integrated transport strategies, how cities work, how cities function. It's like drawing a distinction between passenger and freight. There's a link between the two. You've got to look at, as you said, you've got to look at what works best in a really common sense way. I've always seen this as not rocket science. I've always seen this as I don't have a bias in favour of a train, a bus or a car. It's what works. And the truth is you need a mix of all of the above. But if you take out public transport from being an option, then guess what? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And you know, in Brisbane, the projects in terms of a good example of the way that the rapid bus system, rapid transit system for buses works in terms of busways very effectively. I agree with the comments that you made, which is why we made funding decisions that we did re the particular modes in cities. But in light rail can work in various areas, including Gold Coast, which had a very high BCR. But rail can work as well, heavy rail. The regional rail link in Victoria had a BCR of, I think from memory, it was something like 3.2, through the roof because of what can happen when you have a rail development and a public transport corridor with increased urban density around it, and the benefit for, in that case, for Geelong, Bendigo and Ballarat, not just for Melbourne. So the idea that you would enable exclusions of classes of infrastructure is, in my view, very much a backward step. Early today I spoke on legislation in the Parliament, read the Land Transport Act. We will move amendments to that legislation in the consideration in detail stage that all projects of value above $100 million, and we've picked that figure because that's what the Coalition said they'd support, need to be assessed by Infrastructure Australia and need to have their assessments published. It's important that this process be transparent as well, because you can't actually look at infrastructure as, I'll look at a road in Sydney or Melbourne or Adelaide or Brisbane in isolation. You have to look at what are the options in terms of transport, road or rail in particular, or what are the public transport options? How does that fit together with employment creation? How does it fit together with planning in terms of our cities, in terms of urban density? All of those issues have to be considered in an integrated way. That is the whole purpose of Infrastructure Australia and what we have done, as opposed to the business of old, which is you look at an electoral map, you see where the marginal seats are and you say that's our priority. A good example, I might say, is the example in terms of road funding that Minister Briggs raised of the South Road in Adelaide. You have one section of the road, Torrens to Torrens, that has heavy freight, that has ready to go, where the preliminary work is going, where the money has been allocated to get that done, but they're not going to do that, the current government. They're going to do another bit because it's in a marginal seat that was promised during the federal election campaign, and say they're going to do the project over 10 years. That is not what we need to do in terms of infrastructure. What we need to do is to take the step back, have a look at proper planning, proper processes, make sure that the funding follows the productivity benefit and the benefit in terms of the way that the economic and social benefits come from. Now, the figures that have been used by Michael and others as well in the video with regard to public transport and what it provides as well, we produced a report, of course, on active transport that showed that one of the benefits of public transport is the proper pricing of externalities includes health. It includes health, it includes carbon and the effect on the environment. It needs to include all of that analysis, and Infrastructure Australia needs to be empowered to do just that. I'm very confident that we've made significant gains in recent years. I'm confident that in terms of moving forward, that the debate is far more advanced than where we were in the past. But if the national government, and I note tonight some changes and I welcome them from Minister Briggs in terms of the position that the current government is taking. if the current government and the national government is allowed to say cities are not our business, it is the business of states and territories and local government, then that will be a very retrograde step indeed. The fact is that people are engaged in this debate. They're engaged in terms of the work that peak bodies do, but they're also engaged at the ordinary mums and dads level. The fact that the State of Australian Cities report was awarded, the 2013 was awarded a prize last night by the Planning Institute. I'll say this, the State of Australian Cities reports were downloaded with regard to the comment about bestsellers that was made earlier on. More than 1 million downloads in full for each report. What does that tell you? That tells you that people actually get it. They get it because they experience it in terms of cities and the way that they function. So part of that's got to be including walking, cycling, public transport, road, rail, buses, light rail. All of it has to fit together of how we move people, but we also need to engage in this debate because part of it as well is about not just the last report that won the award, said two things. It said, one, that the growth, there was this disparity of wealth in terms of high-income jobs around corridors. Transport corridors do that. So you potentially have a real disparity of the outer suburbs and the commuter regional cities, but you need to make sure that the transport systems are better, but also we need to create jobs closer to where people live as well, which is again why we need integration, not just of transport systems, but of employment and social infrastructure as well. I congratulate you once again tonight. I had my choice of portfolio after the election, and I chose this because this is an area in terms of infrastructure, transport. I added tourism, but so that because I think that fits naturally as well. But I believe that this is absolutely the key to our economic future in a country like ours, where we have a relatively sparse population spread over such long distances. So I congratulate you on your work. I look forward to continuing such a constructive relationship into the future. Thanks very much.
So Albo's all right, except he's a South Sydney supporter. But, so no, thanks, Albo, for coming along, and we always enjoy and appreciate your contribution to the broad debate. And as you mentioned, BIC is not about the mode, it's actually about what's in the best interest of the nation and getting the best transport system we can, and we have clearly a role in that. Just welcome to Alana McTiernan. Many in the room might know Alana, who's previous Minister for Transport in WA, but now in the Federal Parliament, and welcome. We did welcome you earlier, but understand you were running a bit late. But I remember you from my days at the Australian Trucking Association and issues such as noise break noise down the Greenslope Hill or the mountain or whatever it was, and a range of things. So we look forward to working with you. Lee Rhiannon will be speaking. She'll arrive at some stage and we'll move to that. But our next speaker is an ex-Minister for Agriculture, the member for Calare, and a pet subject of his, which is the gestation period of giraffe and the difficulties. All right, just joking, Cobby. When Lee Rhiannon arrives, we'll have Lee up to speak. I know Albo's got to get moving, so feel free to go when you need to, Albo. I know it's important engagement, and have a good chat around your tables in relation to a lot of the issues we've been talking about today. Thanks.